Welcome to Long Box Diving, where we pull comics out of the long box. So I wanted to make a video about this comic, Defenders of 111. Let me make sure that you guys can see it well. That one. Um, I don't know why, but it's left me very kind of disappointed, if that makes sense. Um, and it's probably doesn't help that I'm jumping into it, and it's not like the middle of a continued story arc. Um, but for standalone, it left me very dissatisfied for some reason. Um, just to give a basic rundown, so you have Patsy Walker here, who's named Hellcat, and basically, from what I was able to gather of the plot from reading the comic, she's feeling she doesn't believe in herself anymore. She doesn't believe in her powers anymore. Um, Not only that, she thinks she might be a demon, and that her father is literally Satan, based on what her mother told her. Um, of course, and she feels all that, right? She feels that way about her powers, that they are demonic in form and fashion, and that somehow makes her evil. And she wants to find out the truth. Is her father really Satan? And so that's the premise of this comic. And it's kind of weird almost, because she goes out to this remote town on her own. The defenders aren't there. Fine, I'm cool with that. Like a journey of self discovery. She goes out, talks to one man who knew her father, and then bumps into some debonair guy who is quite clearly a villain. Um, and she goes with this guy to his house, um, and spends the night there. And it's kind of weird. Um, I don't know. It's kind of dissatisfying. So she goes to this house, and maybe I'm not in the right mindset for it or something. I don't know. But she goes to this house and tries to leave the house to track down her dad, right? But her powers aren't working, and and she ends up getting really dizzy, like she's drunk or drugged, and ends up going right back to the boarding house. And there's the debonair guy, and three other people there, all laughing at her, making fun of her. Um, and when she comes back to consciousness, because she passes out, when she comes back to consciousness, the debonair guy is revealed to be Satan, not the Satan, just a Satan, um, and three of his cronies. So Hellcat beats them all up and is turning into a demon form while doing it, um, and is lifting the bad guy debonair man, who's Satan, up into the air, and is about to throw him onto the ground. And she denies that demon strength and that demon form of that she has, and says, "No, I'm not going to give in. No, I'm not like you." Um, and this guy's claiming to be her father, right? He's claiming to be Satan, her father. And she finally says, and this is apparently like the climax of the story, where this is supposed to be super dramatic and climactic, and a very important part of her story, where she's overcoming some addiction or strength to um, she's overcoming something she sees as a flaw, and is persevering past it to become a better person and not relying on the demonic stuff. Um, but my problem is, it feels really underwhelming when it's the climax. To say, yeah, she overcame this really hard struggle of hers, of dealing with this demonic power, um, and not giving into it. and it's really important and great and such a triumph that she did that. I don't get that sense, and I think that's my biggest problem is the part that's supposed to be climactic. I don't get the sense that she's actually done something crazy. She just didn't beat up one man. And I don't know, maybe that's because I haven't read the previous books. Maybe this is something Hellcat's been dealing with for a while, of constantly going like into this other form and getting a bunch of superpowers and speeding up a bunch of people. But it feels weird to me to be introduced to a weakness for the first time in the comic itself, that there's no inclination that it's been a struggle for her, and then all of a sudden she just overcomes it, and the day is saved. But then it's even more underwhelming, I guess. It's because Satan's like, ah ha ha. See, I knew you were special. If you had given in, you would have given me your soul. Muhaha. I am not your father, and I guess you deserve an explanation. You've proved yourself worthy. So it's weird because it turns it from a personal triumph into a test somebody else had for her, which is kind of weird. Because if you're trying to play it as, oh, it's a personal triumph, it's something I succeeded in. My goal was to do this and overcome this struggle. And in reality, it was all just a test set up by somebody else and fabricated by somebody else. Um, well, that kind of sucks because that turns the personal triumph into something somebody else is orchestrating. Um, and I just don't think it works with this. I don't know. Maybe it would have helped again if I had read earlier comics. But yeah, I was just left kind of underwhelmed. And of course, the Satan guy, who's not actually Satan, um, it then takes her to like a plane of hell or something, and begins to talk to Hellcat about the nature of evil and the nature of good and what, um, like Satan and Mephisto and like others like him are all just reflections of people's dreams, and um, that's can be evil, that can be good, um, and that Satan actually in this comic is just a trickster almost, and he has some well-meaning intentions, and some other times he's just trying to be mean. Um, and it's really weird because it's sorry, my mouse keeps lighting up and I keep seeing it, um, because they go into this dialogue of the nature of evil, um, and it's just not interesting, not really. Um, yeah, it's not interesting to have a very low level discussion of what evil is in the world and what, this guy's place in it is, and Hellcat's place in it is. And this guy's not Hellcat's father, and that's the big revelation. And of course, then she like the only reason Satan is even interested in tricking her is because, um, his son fell in love with Hellcat, so that's the only reason he's done any of this to Hellcat. Like, really? That's kind of lame. My son was in love with you, so I've decided to pull a trick on you to see if you're truly worthy of being a heroine. I don't know. Maybe there's some context I'm missing. That's possible, but I was just left very underwhelmed by the comic. Um, because not a lot happens in it, and then what does happen is a lot of exposition. And there's a couple things I want to point out that were interesting for better or worse, depending on the thing that's interesting. Um, but yeah, and then Hellcat goes and finds her real dad, and it's this, and she believes in herself again. Imagine a very Spider-Man story. I think it was Spider-Man 2. I don't remember. Um, where basically Peter Parker's like, I don't believe in myself anymore, so I don't have powers and I can't shoot webs. Well, that's this Hellcat story. Is she doesn't believe in herself, and so And she doesn't believe in her powers, so she can't actually really use them well. Blah blah blah. Um, it's just I'm left with a very dissatisfied, because it wasn't interesting. Something that I feel is probably the climax of Hellcat's story, and a very big character arc, because this is a Hellcat centric comic in the Defenders. It did not feel that way to me. So there's a couple things I want to point out. So one, this comic is prefaced by one of those um, diary entries of basically recapping. So, you want to know how I got here? That you see in television shows and are always cliche and just really kind of stupid. This one's diary format, basically saying, ah, man, I can't believe I got to this point and blah, 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 and this is all that happened. Um, I guess I better start from the beginning. But the beginning is not the beginning of Hellcat's story. It's the beginning of. Well, it technically is. It does go into some of her origins. This kind of. Okay, so I guess it is somewhat a beginning. But this whole comic is framed by those diary entries of her writing in her diary about, hey, this is my feelings and this is who I am, the origins of me, and it's. Uh, I I don't know. It may be a preference thing. Um, I I've grown up reading fantasy, right? In fantasy, you especially epics, um, you have many characters, and the point of view is a third person, and it's partially omniscient most of the time, right? Um, and so you end up, especially with good fantasy, you end up seeing a lot of the actions of people and what people say, and I kind of expect actions, right? I think good fantasy writing has, um, it's show don't tell, right? You are showing the character do something really epic, and the character themselves isn't happy while doing it. Like they're fighting a huge battle, but for some reason the character just isn't feeling it, and that can tell you a lot about the character's mental state, depending on the context of the character. Um, and so I kind of expect that in writing, almost as show don't tell. I don't care for the exposition of, oh, this is how I felt while doing this, and this is where I came from, and blah, blah, blah. And I don't know, I'm not a big first person reader, right? Where it says, I did this and I did that, and the diary entry kind of thing. That's not something I've ever been big in, so maybe it's just a style choice that I'm just not keyed into. But I did not get the whole diary thing, um, of sitting down and this is my story and how I got here. Um, and I don't know how you could do it better. Possibly have showing Hellcat, and the events of her transformation, or in her power onset, and Satan messing with her, etc., etc. Maybe that would have made it better. I don't know, but for a stylistic choice, that might just be a style thing. Other people might like the whole diary entry better. I know it's definitely a form of writing that is employed, so it wasn't for me. But that wasn't like my biggest problem, and the thing that left me disappointed was the climax. The diary entry didn't hurt me, if that makes sense. It's there. I didn't prefer that as something else, but I could see definitely that's somebody's thing. Um, so there's three things I wanted to talk about. That was one. The second one. The second one. This was really cool. And again, this is a stylistic choice. Um, this is very much a stylistic choice, but it is something I adore. And in this comic, it's funny because I really, this comic was very underwhelming for me from a story standpoint. The art was okay, but they did a whoever was the panelist and the artist and the colorist and the dialogue penciler, whoever did all that for these panels, spot on. I love this idea because it's something that can only be done in comics, right? Um, like for example, another thing that can only be done, and I'll get into what it is in just a second, but just give an idea. Another thing that can only be done in comics is breaking through panels, right? Literally doing a fourth wall break, where they are ripping through panels as a character to walk to another character, and that's very meta. Um, and that's also something only comics can do. You're not going to see that in a book, almost ever, unless it's like a graphic novel, right? You're not going to see that in a book where the words literally are, this character ripped through the pages of the book. If they are doing it, it must be a very niche thing or it doesn't work. You're not going to really see that in a movie, unless it's a very stylistic movie like Scott Pilgrim versus the World, where it's meant to imitate comics and the art of comics and the panels of comics. But again, it's imitating comics. You're not really going to see a movie that's based inside of a comic book panel. You're not going to see this really in a video game unless it's trying to imitate a comic. And this is something so uniquely done by comics that it's really cool. And this one specifically, I loved, and it's again a unique thing that can only be done in comics, and it was really cool. I want to show it off because I think it was great, and I can do that. But the the art team, when Hellcat was kind of drunk and dizzy and or drugged, I don't know, or maybe like magic was affecting her or something. The art team made all the writing squiggly and off kilter and bend and wobble. They made the panels bend and wobble. And I love that because it gives you, the reader, the sense of, oh, this makes me feel dizzy. This makes me feel queasy. Everything is a little bendy and warped um, and it feels like nothing is in the right place. They do this in video games when you're drunk, right? And everything is kind of shifting and wobbling, and that's a very video game thing. But for this specific instance, to actually get the panels themselves, something so unique to comics, to bend and wobble and shake, and it's a really cool experience and an idea. Um, and I would like to see this done more in different comics because it is so unique and something that can really only be done here. And it's just it gives you that sense of being in the comic, and I love it. Even the characters and the background art are shifted and wobbly. Um, Here, let me see and make sure that you guys can see this well. Like, from the panels to the words to the characters themselves, everything feels, when you're reading it, it feels like you're in the same position as Hellcat, which is really, really cool, especially when it's a comic focused on a single character. If it's a single character comic, you want to get that sympathy and that empathy with a character to get in their heads and their mindset. It's that first person writing, and that's a really good way of doing it, and I love that. Um, so yeah, that was the second thing I wanted to bring up, and it just as things I noticed and I thought was interesting in this comic. The third thing, the third thing, and this is probably a negative for me. Um, the only reason, this they got away with calling it the Defenders instead of Hellcat and making a Hellcat book, which I don't know the logistics of everything, but I would imagine a singular issue based around Hellcat, probably not as popular as the Defenders, especially for the time period. So the only reason they got away with calling it the Defenders instead of Hellcat is there's a single panel, well, a single page. It's a couple panels. Um, it's a single page right in the middle of the story, right smack dab in the middle of the story, and it features the Defenders meeting Nighthawk, who was supposed to be dead. And then that has nothing to do with the story. This page has nothing to do with the story at all in any way, shape, or form. Um, they just meet Nighthawk, who's not dead, and then they're like, "Oh, look, there's somebody else to talk to," and then that's the end of the Defenders, and we're back to the Hellcat. That was interesting. I don't think that was a good idea, if I'm being honest, um, because it kind of detracts from the story. If you're going to make the story Hellcat focused, she's a member of the Defenders. That is perfectly fine, in my opinion, to do, right? If you look at the Avengers, you could have a story about a single Avenger, right? And that they left the team for some reason, and we're going to focus on why they left the team. It's like, as an example, in the Teen Titans show, the Cyborg at one point leaves the team, and we focus on him and why he left the team. Um, and you can swap back between Cyborg's mission and the rest of the team, but you want to give that either equal amounts of space or only focus on one. Um, because otherwise you get a situation like this where it feels jarring and tilted and just out of the blue. Oh, we're focusing on the Defenders now, but they have no impact on the story I'm reading right here. It doesn't help, and then we're back to just focusing on Hellcat. Really should have just focused on Hellcat's story, especially if this was a comic that was meant to be about Hellcat and her climactic arc as a character. Um, and yeah, that was just weird. I don't know why they did that. Probably because they needed the Defenders in order to call it a Defenders book. Um, if I had to guess about the politics. So, I think that's all I have for this video. It's been 23 minutes that I've been talking about this comic. I don't know. Maybe in the comics, if there's some hardcore Defenders fans that see this video, let me know down in the comments that, hey, look, that it really was a long arc of her dealing with this issue for 20 issues or something, right? That's about 2 years of writing. This was something she's been dealing with, and like as a character, and we've known about it. Let me know, because if it was, then I can understand it better. But as it stands, I was left feeling kind of underwhelmed by something that was clearly supposed to be climactic, especially for a character. So yeah, let me know down in the comments. Also, the second thing I'd like to know: have you guys seen other effects like how they did with the panels here in other comics? Because I like that idea of being able to use something that is natural to comics in a way that can't be used elsewhere, to actually and give you that sensation that you're actually in the story. And I really like that. So if anyone's actually seen that before in another comic, let me know, because I like that idea and I kind of want to see it more. I think that's all I have. I'll see you next time in the long box.